Hey guys, welcome to week 4. I really wanted to stop and say, hey, all you cool cats and kittens. And if you can figure out what I'm talking about in this, then I need you to drop a comment in the video. Just so I know you're out there and you're actually listening to my lectures because I miss you. So I wanted to go over a few things today before we start this new week. Of course, I'm recording this early, so hopefully I'm not getting ahead of myself. But you all should have picked up your lesson plans on Thursday. And we are doing the nervous system a little bit different this week. So we're going to go ahead and go through our lecture today. And whenever you do your lecture, you're going to go through your notes. Everything should be in order for your notes. If there's a blank, fill it in off the screen. If there is doodle notes, fill it in off the screen. Now, I will tell you that these doodle notes right here, we will not start the notes until we get to peripheral nervous system, but you need to include what's in the central nervous system, which I will tell you what to write in a minute, okay? So I just want to make you aware of that before we start our notes on that. Second thing I want you guys to do, you're going to watch a YouTube video on the Crash Course of Anatomy and Physiology. It's the guy that we always listen to in class when he explains things. He is going to give you an overview of action potential. Action potential is the charging of the neurons when the impulse is reached, just like we talked about. We're going to review that a little bit today. And you need to follow along. You each got a note like this. You need to follow along and fill in the gaps. Here's a hint. When there is something comes on the screen from the video that's in writing, like it says he's talking, then something comes up and there's writing, guarantee you, you're gonna have a blank to fill in. So just follow along like that. I would also watch the video more than once. It's only 11 minutes and 43 seconds. It explains action potential in a higher level, and you guys need to know that process before we test on it because it is kind of tricky. This is the one thing where I wish we were all in class together because action potential gets a little bit sketchy. So those are the things that you need to do. Your things to turn in this week is going to be your nervous system worksheet 2 and this right here from your notes that you're taking off the YouTube video you're going to have later from our dude that always does it for us. I will post those links both onto RenWeb so you have them, and you may also ask questions, or if you need to get the link, I will send it to you as well. So let's go ahead and just review what we talked about. Last week we talked about that there's 2 types of nerves in our system. We first have our nerve cells, and then our nerve cells include neurons and neuroglia. Remember, neuroglia is the glue, and nerve cells are the ones that pass through our body. So remember, neurons make up 10%, neuroglia makes up 90%. So each of the neurons will attach to another neuron to make sure that the impulse or the action that needs to happen in the nervous system is transmitting correctly. And remember, this is going to be part of your homework on your sheet for the crash course worksheet. So make sure that you know the different parts of the neuron. Dendrites. Dendrites are taking in the information, and it's going to take it to the cell body. Cell body is what's taking it and sending it down the nodes of Ranvier, or the myelin sheath that it's insulated in, to jump to the axon passageway, which will then again jump to more dendrites, and the dendrites will connect to another nerve cell or neuron, or will get the action through for you. Okay? So we talked about the different types of neurons. Unipolar neurons are 1, bipolar neurons are 2, multipolar neurons are 3, and the different types of neuroglia. Okay. Now remember last week we talked about central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. If you see the word CNS, it means central nervous system. If you see the words PNS, what does it mean? Peripheral nervous system. You can see over here that which ones are found in the CNS and which ones are found in the PNS. Okay, so make sure you pay close attention to that. All right, so let's open up to our notes and let's talk about what the nervous system is divided into. We have the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is made up of different nerves, cranial nerves that originate in the brain, and spinal nerves that originate in the spine. The peripheral nervous system is then further divided. If you look at anything in the blue over here, you see that that is the peripheral nervous system. And so when it says further divided, it means that those neurons are going down those nerves to make sure all of the terminal axons are working and functioning properly. This means everything from breathing to walking to eating is all controlled with our spinal nerves or our cranial nerves. So if we have our peripheral nervous system, there's certain parts of our peripheral nervous system that do specific actions. This is where we are going to come into our next one, our doodle notes, where it says organization of the nervous system. So the top one, I need you to put central nervous system, or CNS, the very top, okay? Where it says central nervous system already written for you. You're going to write consist of what? Brain and spinal column. Underneath that is where our doodle notes will start from here. Peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system is comprised of all nerves not in the brain or the spinal cord. So that means all of our other sensory nerves. So you look over here. This is how the flow works. Our sensory or afferent division sends impulses from the senses to the central nervous system. Okay? It goes to the peripheral nervous system and down to our motor division. If we say motor, it's going to have anything to do with movement. So our motor division sends impulses from the central nervous system to the muscles and to the glands. Remember that we have different glands that secrete different hormones. Our central nervous system has to make sure that we are getting that information so that our body maintains homeostasis. So we have autonomic nervous system. This is involuntary muscle control. We don't have any control. We don't have any control the way our heart beats, right? That's autonomic, involuntary. So somatic nervous system is voluntary muscle control. Both of them come from the motor division because they both have to do with movement in the body. The next one is the sympathetic division, used for emergency situations such as fight or flight. So we have sometimes what we call reflexes. Our autonomic nervous system is actually in control of those. So for example, if you get scared from something or something frightens you, involuntarily you may jump or you may yelp. That is a movement that is not controlled because it has now given off the hormone from your brain that is telling you it's in fight or flight mode. Then you have the parasympathetic division. So this part controls, reduces sympathetic response and provides resting function such as digestion and urination. So I'll move that down so you can see it. Reduces sympathetic response and provides resting function such as digestion and urination. So those are also going to be involuntary at times. Okay? So you should have all of those written in your doodle notes exactly in the boxes. The only thing that's not on this slide right here is central nervous system at the top. And all you're writing in that consists of the brain and the spinal cord. So let's talk about how all of these things happen, how we have the motor division happen, how we have our fight or flight response. All of it contains through what we call a chain of events and action potential. So let's talk about those nerve impulses. A nerve impulse is an electrical signal that travels along the neuron. Okay, so remember we talked about how we have the cell body and then we have the, actual things with the dendrites on the end. The dendrites take in the information and take it to the cell body. Then we have these that are covered in the myelin sheath. These are the nodes over in here to get to the axon, which is here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Okay? So when we get here, once this happens from the dendrites take it in, take it to the cell body. The cell body sends out this nerve impulse that is going to bump, down those nodes of Ranvier and move to where it needs to go so the function can be performed. This is called the nerve impulse right here. This part is called the nerve impulse. What happens to create this impulse? A sodium-potassium pump transports of ions that require energy, creates an electrical potential along the neuron in which the cell is negatively charged and the environment is positively charged. So we know, and you'll figure out in the video you're going to watch later, you have to have negative and positive to have a neutral resting potential. So you can see right here where you have ATP or energy, sodium coming in, what's coming out? Potassium coming out. Those have to be regulated for it to go forth. A lot of times when people have brain surgeries or something along those lines, they want them to eat sodium so that they are continuing to maintain cognitive function. So that's why, it's because they need to make sure their nerve impulses are working correctly. Let's see how this actually happens. So we have our little channel down here at the bottom. So when the neuron is stimulated, meaning when the neuron enters into this, either by environment or another neuron, because remember, the neuron is going to attach to another neuron to tell it what to do, or your fight or flight response is going to get alerted from the environment, and sodium rushes into the neuron. Okay, so it comes in quickly. And then it reverses the charges, so it makes it neutral. When they reverse the charge, that's called action potential. This process quickly moves down the length of the neuron, which we have right here. As the impulses passes, sodium again is pumped out and the resting potential returns. So remember, sodium pumps out, potassium comes in, and then vice versa. Okay? So when it's resting, sodium's out. When it's going, sodium comes in. They have to switch places the whole time. Okay, we're going to pass by that. So let's talk about, you have some doodle notes here I want you to fill in. Okay, one at the top, up here, you're just going to write it up at the top above direction of impulse. Here's our axon down here. Okay, here's our axon. The impulse arrives and the threshold is met, meaning everything is exactly how it should be so that the impulse can go where it needs to go. Okay, as you can see, we have our sodiums and our potassiums. Voltage-gated Na channels are opened and Na enters the cell. So that means sodium. Sodium is entering the cell. Voltage-gated K channels are open and K leaves the cell. Sodium channels begin to rest. So sodium goes in, potassium goes out. This is happening all the way down here. Voltage gate potassium channels are still open, and so sodium channels are now at a resting state. So it's basically saying everything's as it should be, the world is exactly right in the land of the neurons, and everything's calm. Sodium and potassium pump restores to the original, so it goes back to the beginning after that. When two neurons meet, so when this process happens, the two neurons are connected, let's say one's right here and one's right here, it is called the synapse. The neurons never touch. That is, the space between them is called the synaptic cleft. So you see this part right here, that is the synaptic cleft. As the impulse reaches the axon terminal, it cannot cross the gap. The impulse stimulates neurotransmitters to be released across the synaptic cleft. So it can't cross the gap, but it's sending messengers over through neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters cause the channels to open in the next neuron, continuing the action potential from one neuron to the next. So let's say that I'm driving down the road and I brake and I don't hit the person in front of me, okay? But there's still some energy coming off of that. Right here is where a neurotransmitter is going to move to that next neuron to let it know what it needs to do next. So they don't actually touch, but it sends a neurotransmitter to open those channels up for action potential to continue. So let's do a brief overview. An action potential arrives at the presynaptic terminal. CA channels open. Synaptic vesicles release neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters